You are now listening to Talk Your Jits podcast.
Welcome to Talk Your Jits podcast. This podcast is, as the name implies, all about Jitsu. I'm your host, Lamar Smith, and today's guest is a black belt who trains at Team Rubo Karaoke. I know I was going to butcher this name. Located in Monroe, North Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, Vernon Kirk.
How's it going today, Lamar?
What's going on, sir? How are you doing today?
Doing great.
Fantastic. First and foremost, man, I would like to thank you for being on the episode. You are the first episode of season 2, and the first episode is being recorded. So it's a lot of new things going on right now.
Looking forward to it, man. I appreciate having me on.
Man, the pleasure is all mine. So without further ado, if you want to give yourself a more thorough introduction, by all means, and let's hear about your jiu-jitsu journey.
All right. Well, like I said, Vernon Kirk. I'm a black belt in BJJ. Actually, I'm getting my first degree Sunday. And then I'm also a black belt in judo. I got my black belt from Bushido Judo in Durham, North Carolina. And depending on, I guess I'm also the head of marketing for Southeastern Sambo Association, and depending on how nationals go, I might be looking at my Master of Sport here relatively soon. I started training in 2009 in judo in June. Kind of a long story, but basically, my son was 5 at the time, and he's 19 now. But he wanted to do karate, and I said, okay, cool. I actually took a lot of taekwondo as a kid, and I was like, yeah, that actually be pretty good for you. He'd done soccer at the beginning of the school year, and he loved it, but when game time came around, he was real shy. So I couldn't get him out on the field for games, but he had fun in practice and da da da. So I said, all right. And so I took him to this school, which is ironically, the location is now where my instructor is. He wasn't there at the time. It was a taekwondo school, but now it's my instructor's school. Take him there and go through the first class, and it was pay $20, get 3 classes, and get a uniform. And he's 5 years old, and he's also he's 19, he's 5'7", and on a heavy day he's 117 pounds. He's never been a big kid, right?
Big boy.
Yeah, he little. But he comes up and he kind of I'm talking to the instructor, and he pulls on my leg and he goes, "Daddy, when do I get my karate uniform?" And she real snotty looks at him and goes, "It's a taekwondo uniform." Now, I understand there's a difference. I understand they come from different parts of the world. I understand all this. But it's his first day and he's 5. There's no need for that. And I'm like, well, I'm never coming back here. And there was this other place in town I was about to take him to. And the next day was the last day of school, and I'm talking to one of the dads, and he's like, "Don't go to that place. They're going to rip you off. They're going to try to pull you into a contract, blah, blah, blah. Come to this judo school with me." Okay, cool. Should be fun. And he goes through class, and he has friends in the class because obviously, the kid's dad, his kids are in the class, and his son was one of my son's best friends, so it worked out real well. And he, again, shy kid, but he was having a really good time. And I'm sitting there talking to the instructor, Sensei Stokes, afterwards. And I'm like, all right, how much, how many times a week? The standard questions parents always ask.
Right.
And he looks at me and he goes, I'm like, all right, so next class tomorrow, I'll see you tomorrow. And he goes, "Big guy, where are you going?" "Home, class is over."
Right.
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
Right. He's like, "Well, the adult class is starting, right?" I'm like, "You think my 5-year-old's ready for the adult class?" He's like, "Get your big ass out of here." I'm like, okay. Now, mind you, I'm also probably about 290 pounds at the time.
Okay.
And I am a fat fuck. I have no other way to put it. And so, as heavy as I was a fairly decent athlete back in the day. I played D3 college football. I wrestled a little bit. I'm not the most athletic guy on planet Earth, but I got a little bit to me. And so I'm like, I'll do this for a month. I'll do it for a month, let him get acclimated, and then dad will fade off into the background. 2 months later, we're competing. 6 months later, I'm cross-training with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. 5 years later, I had a black belt in judo. 6 years later, I was opening my own school. So that month kind of took a little bit of an extended vacation, but
Yeah, I see.
but I fell in love, and
Mhm.
I was doing judo, and a lot of the guys who were like around my age, around my size, that I could now take down pretty regularly, and I could dominate on the feet. When we'd hit the ground, they'd beat the brakes off me, and I'm like, well, how are you that much better than me on the ground? And they go,
Mhm.
oh, well, we go to this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school in Mebane, which is like, we were actually driving like 10 miles or so to the next town to take judo. And I lived in Mebane, and I was like, what? Take me. So I
Right,
showed up
let's
to a
go.
class, and it was December, and I just started a new job, and I'd actually been out of work from like March till then, because I had lost my job when the economy crashed, and it was, this is '09 when things were just nuts with the housing bubble. And
Mhm.
so I walk in, I take a trial class, and I look at, Professor Hubao, and I'm like, hey, I really had a good time. I'm waiting to get paid. When I get paid, I'll be back. And he, just like as somebody who's taught martial arts, you get to the point where you realize a lot of times when somebody says that, they're just kissing you off, and they just don't have the balls to
Yeah.
say I didn't like it. And I'm like, no, I really meant that shit. I just, it was Christmas, blah blah blah. I was back in January. He looks at me when I walked in the door. He goes, "Oh, you're back." And I'm like, "Well, I told you I was going to be back. Like, where's the surprise?" Not knowing at the time, obviously, still a white belt. And I've been with Professor Hubao ever since. And so I just, it was one of those things where I just did it. It just, a lot of it was the routine of it. I had a job
Mhm.
where it was very kind of 9 to 5 ish, even though I had to travel some for, work. And I'd get home, I'd, hang out with the kids a little bit and pack my bag, and usually take my son with me. And I started taking my daughter with me for a little bit as well too. And I just kind of really, really got into it. And so I just, every day, it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday was Jitsu, Tuesday, Thursday was judo. Saturdays, if I wasn't competing, we definitely had a judo class every Saturday. So I'd go to the judo class. And then every now and like probably once or twice a month, Ruben would have what he called no-gi, because we never did no-gi.
Mhm.
And no-gi was essentially he'd dream up some nasty workout, like, he'd have like kettlebells and weights out, or he'd have this thing where he'd start like a minute timer. And like we had like 3,000 square feet of mat space. So you'd be jogging around the gym, and you'd have boxing gloves on. And whenever like, the minute would ding, one person would go into the center, and he'd be holding mitts, and you'd have to be throwing combos at the mitts. And we'd do that until we were dying. And then we'd roll no-gi, and that was our no-gi days. And so
Woo-hoo.
yeah, exactly. And so I was just doing that, and I just slowly, slowly got into it. And in 2014, I tested for my black belt in judo, and I got that. And then the year actually in 2013, at the end of 2013, I got my purple belt in BJJ. And my instructor, who was an older gentleman, looked at me and goes, "Okay, Verno, you purple belt now, so you run my kids program." Like, you have a kids program? No, but you're going to start it. I'm like, am I
We do
now?
now.
Okay. So my first student was my son, and I ran his kids program for a little while. And then in 2015, I was kind of sick of the company I was working for. And we were, so my instructor, my friend John, and I have, we did a lot of like, help him run his gym, and kind of helped him build up his network and things like that. And we get this email from a guy down in Monroe who owns a CrossFit gym. And he goes,
Mhm.
"I got your name from a friend of mine. There's a friend of professors named Rafael who owned and had an affiliation in like Louisiana, Mississippi, and had a bunch of schools underneath him. And he always bought his t-shirts from this guy, Rodney, in Monroe, who, I mean, the guy's got a business where he prints like 20,000 t-shirts a day. And
Mm.
he goes, "Hey, I've got this big CrossFit gym, and I think, some of that space could probably be used for something like Jitsu. Do you have somebody who'd be interested? And he goes, well, I don't have anybody up that way, but if you're talking to anybody in North Carolina, you talk to Hubal. So he reaches out to Hubal. I, of course, take the email and I start talking to Rodney. And I was talking to a friend of mine one day and I'm trying to figure out my life. And I go, actually, it was a therapist, if I'm being completely honest about it. I'm talking to my therapist and I'm like, and I forgot how we got on that subject. And she goes, well, why don't you do that? I
Right.
can't do that. Why not? Why you gotta be asking me all these hard questions? What's wrong with you? So I took the plunge and I
Trying to get
moved
all
down here.
personal.
Exactly. And I just started doing this. And, I've always had to keep a 9 to 5 and actually shut my school down last year to pursue some other stuff in my career. But I I now, I kind of like float between like three gyms around me where like I'll help teach and I'll just go train and I have a lot of fun doing it. But for me, this is all like I, I I really enjoy the kind of I enjoy teaching. Running a school on a day-to-day basis drives me insane. And when you're trying to do, a full-time job and you got kids, it's a little bit much. So I said, I'm going to take a break from this for a little while. And if I ever decide to go back into it, I will. And if not, I'm just going to keep training and having fun. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Definitely.
and then
But
like, I mean,
yeah, like I'm go ahead, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say the only thing like is Sambo. And in 2018, a friend of mine who, he was starting to kind of get into the whole Sambo thing and he'd done some competition in it. And he was hosting an event and he wanted to have some Sambo in it. And he goes, I don't know who to talk to. And I didn't really know anybody, but I had Facebook friends within the Sambo community. I'm like, well, there's this person, let me put you in this group. And he reaches back out to me and he's like, dude, thank you. Come compete. It's on me. Like, you've been a huge help. That was the spur I needed. And that was 2018. And then went to an event of his in 2020. And it was his first sanctioned event with USA Sambo. And then the guys at USA Sambo actually invited my son to go compete in Russia. He was 17 at the time, and unfortunately, COVID hit, and his event got canceled. But then I got to go to Masters Worlds in Belarus that year, which was a
Oh
lot of fun.
wow.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome.
Yep.
But yeah, my journey, like, well, teaching rather, kind of started the
Yep.
same way. I've been training at H2O for it'd be 6 years in May, April,
Okay.
one of the two. So it's coming up. It's coming up on 6 years. Been training there, and then he had kids class, so I would go. I would just be up there to assist and whatnot. And then when I got to blue belt, he was like, how you feel about teaching kids class?" I'm like, "Sure, it's more jujitsu." That's how I saw it.
Yep.
And then, I blinked and I've been assistant instructor for like the past like 3-4 years, still doing kids class, doing some adults class. And then eventually, we're trying to do more classes. So, something else I'm going to try to pursue. So I'm deep in it, man. Like deep
I
in it.
I mean, you get better teaching. Like,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
it, like, to be honest, and this happens to a lot of guys, right? Like,
Hmm.
when I left and I moved down to Charlotte in 2015, I really like. I've always been under my instructor, and I go home and see him as much as I can. I have other friends who are black belts, and I will come to them with problems, and they'll come to me with problems and all that stuff. But like, I haven't been in a gym like receiving instruction on a regular basis since I was a purple belt, really. And a lot of it, a lot of my improvement has happened because I'm teaching. Like I did a video for BJJ Fanatics, and it's on. So like,
Hmm.
I always say to people like, once you get, unless you're like a bigger dude, once you get past about blue belt, you're not really going to finish people from side control anymore. It's just not going to happen. So if you're going to, be a top player, which, judo, I want to be on top, and
Hmm.
you're not going to do very well finishing people from side control. So you need to find other ways. Well, my two places I finish people the most are either north south or Keisugatami. Like, I just my north-south Kimura, there's a couple of people I can thank for that. And then that dinky little armbar from Case Gatami, I catch a lot of people with because I do it a little bit differently, and I always have.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember teaching a class, and I'd probably had my school for maybe a year at that point. Yeah, because I was in the second location, so it was more than a year. It was, because I moved at about the year mark. And one of my guys goes, "How do you do that?" I'm like, "Well, I just showed you." Like, "Yeah, but how do you do that?" And I'm like, "How do I do that?" So I actually had them film me, and I went back and I watched all the little movements I was doing to figure it out. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, that's really kind of slick." And so not only was I now teaching them that, but then it was allowing me to improve upon it because I wasn't just reacting. I was actually having time to break down my movements and saying, like, okay, well, if I do it this way, this is a little bit more efficient. This is a little bit faster. This is this, this is that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of those moves where it's like, I'll be at a gym, especially like when I was like a purple belt or a brown belt, and they'd see me do it to like a white belt or a blue belt, and the instructor is like, "You're not going to get that shit on me." And then I'll hit them with it, and they were like, "How the fuck did you do that?" Like, and I'm like, there's the thing that makes jiu-jitsu beautiful is like I in a lot of ways I kind of like I've competed in just about every grappling rule set I can think of that's outside of like Mongolian belt wrestling or something like that. But like I have done, I wrestled in high school, which is folk style. I did freestyling Greco tournaments back then. I have named the rule set in jujitsu. I have done it. IBJJF, ADCC, sub only, EBI, all of these
Oh
things.
wow.
I've done, sambo. The only thing I haven't done is catch wrestling, and I'm actually talking with Josh LeDuc about trying to get a match down in Florida for that because I want to have them all on my damn list.
Might as well,
And
right?
exactly, and the thing is, it's like people get so like I see it all the time where guys are like, that doesn't work. Why? Well,
Mm-hmm.
nobody else does it. So what? Like the best way I've ever heard technique put when it comes to like when people say low percentage technique was actually by the comedian Daniel Tosh, and he has this bit where
Mm-hmm.
he talks about how Andy Warhol says everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame, and he goes but that's not aggregate. It's not like everybody in this room gets 15 minutes. He goes it's an average, so it's like 0 0 0. Then he points to himself 23 years 0 0 0, right? And that's kind of how it is with certain techniques, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody else, and it might be that I've just got something weird with how I move that makes that technique work really well, or it just
Yeah.
might be that for whatever reason it clicked with me mentally, so now I can do it repeatedly, or whatever the case may be. But it doesn't mean that it's a low percentage technique for me. It just means it's a low percentage technique for a lot of people.
For a lot of other
And
people, right?
right, and like I don't view case gatami as a low percentage technique. I do view it as a low percentage technique in jiu-jitsu, and not because jiu-jitsu is better at defending it, but I view it as a low percentage technique in jiu-jitsu because jiu-jitsu doesn't teach you how to do it properly anymore. Like, um, it's the most popular pin in judo. It's one of the best pins you can get in wrestling or sambo. Like, but all of a sudden in jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu is so special, it loses its magic. Like, I don't believe that. Like,
Because
I
you
look at
don't see, yeah, you don't see a lot of people play from that position. It's
right,
usually as as a transition.
right.
So
Well, and I
right.
mean, again, like if I'm just trying to strictly pin you,
Mm-hmm.
Case Gatami is great, but you're not trying to just strictly pin somebody in BJJ. So, like, the way I attack out of Case Gatami is I do it through the transition to Case Gatami, right? But I also
Okay.
know that if I get to Case Gatami, I'm going to be able to hold you better than most BJJ guys will because of the judo and the wrestling. And then, worst case scenario, like if you start to get out of it, I know how to bail out of the technique and keep top position instead of giving up my back or something like that. And it's because, again, I cross train. I think so many people get like, I know there's a lot of no, like the funny thing is like you hear all the no gi guys say, well, you don't need gi to be successful in no gi. I'm I don't want to disagree, but I am a little bit because it goes like this. Gordon Ryan started off in the gi. I'm sure he
Mhm.
did, at least for the first year or two, he was in the gi probably a decent a bit. I know he doesn't really touch it anymore, and that's fine. And again, cool. But name a guy, if you want to put Gordon Ryan as a strictly no gi guy, cool. Okay. Name a guy that's won ADCC that has only been a no gi guy who doesn't have a good resume in the gi, or at least a decent resume in the gi. Jeff Monson, okay.
Mhm.
Outside of that, I mean, a lot of them come from a gi background, and I'm not saying the gi is the end all be all. I like the gi better. It's just I'm better at it. Like I'll like
Right.
my gi record's decent. My no gi record's abysmal. I'll be the first to tell you. Like again, so I'm the actual complete opposite of what I'm stating here. But um, I think the way you learn how to slow it down and control it is very important. And having that friction in the beginning, I think, is very helpful. I don't, I
Mhm.
think if you're trying to train for ADCC and you've got a good base of jiu-jitsu underneath you, do you need to put the gi on? No, probably not. To train
Mhm.
MMA, do you need to put a gi on? No. Like
No.
I'll fully agree with you on those fronts. But my thing is like, there's some guys where it's like all I do is IBJJF. Like that's all you see them at is like they go to like every IBJJF event on planet Earth, and that's all that's all they ever do. Okay, cool. Like you do IBJJF gi. Cool. That's your thing.
Right. That's
That's
your
what makes you
thing.
happy. Right. Cool. I have no beef with that. My goal is always to be I want to be able to transfer between rule sets, like not flawlessly, but like my losses in like sambo, for example. And I did one sambo tournament in 2018. I did several, and I've been kind of doing multiple a year ever since. My only losses in sambo are to some guy in Belarus who I hate to be the guy who's like he ended up winning my division, but he actually did. You know what I mean? My friend Ben, who got me into sambo, who is a BJJ black belt, a judo black belt, a master of sport in sambo, who medaled at Worlds that year, American Combat Jiu Jitsu black belt, and a master combatives instructor in the Army.
Jeez.
Yeah, there's a
Thick
reason they call him
resume.
Grizzly, dog.
Right.
Like, and one of his students who is a pro fighter and much younger than me, and just a freak athlete. Those are my losses in sambo.
Wow.
Okay, like I'm 2-2 on fight to wins. My two losses in fight to win judo are to a guy who was on the Brazilian national team and a BJJ black belt from Brazil, and a guy who had been training judo for like 20 years. Okay.
Okay.
And won nationals multiple times. And I'm like, yeah, he's good.
I could take that. I could take that.
Yeah. I like,
Yeah,
and I mean,
that's I
and
can take
again,
that.
like I if you're happy with like I just like to do gi jiu-jitsu, or I just like to do no gi, or I just like to do sambo or judo, cool. Like especially as an older guy, like I'm gonna be 45 next month. I I view this as kind of like my side hustle. You know what I mean? Like I have
Mhm.
a career, I have all these other things, but if you're a 35-year-old blue belt with a family and a career, like you're doing this for fun, and if that's where you have the most fun, dude, cool. But like
Right.
get out your comfort zone a little bit, have some fun with it, and that's where and like that at first it's kind of like oh shit, but it's like a roller coaster. It's real scary at the beginning. By the end of it, you're having a blast.
Oh yeah. Like we've been having this conversation a lot lately because I've been during open mats. I prefer no gi and during
Hmm.
during open mats because we're gi we train gi a lot. So
Yep.
those little moments where I do get to train no gi, I'm enjoying it so much. So my our other brown belt, he's like gi, like gi to the end. And I'm like, I love gi, don't get me wrong, but I'm having a little bit more fun with no gi.
Yep.
And they're like, why? I was like, because I don't have to I don't have to burn my arms out
Mm-hmm.
because I'm using grabbing the wrist, the back of the arm, the neck, and stuff like that. So that way, when I do put on the gi, nothing changes.
Yep.
Like I can still work them same grips, and I could be able to. My arms will last a whole lot longer because
Right.
I'm not fighting cloth and holding like this the whole time and burning my arms out. So
Well,
it's to me, it's like one can't exist without the other.
agreed.
As much as
And
people want to make it seem like two different entities, like no, they exist on the same coin.
well, here's what I say, and like
Mm-hmm.
this drives me nuts. Like I've lost to some really good gi guys, and I'm like, all right, go against me in no gi. I don't do no gi. So if you take off your magic pajamas, you lose your powers.
Right, right.
Or I'll have guys who, they're no gi guys. And they'll beat me no gi. And I'm like, do a gi match with me. No, I don't like that. So again, like it's like if you can't compete in a division because you're not allowed to heel hook somebody, if that one submission is gone and your game is trash, after that, then
Right.
your game was probably trash to begin with. Like
Beforehand,
I'll be
right.
and like I will admit the reason why I'm not as good no-gi is because I am way better standing when you have a handle for me to grab onto. Like my judo is
Mm-hmm.
better than my wrestling. Okay. And my front headlock game is way better in a gi because I've got all these really sneaky little lapel chokes I love. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
like, okay. And like, but the thing is, I don't care because my whole point is I'm like, well, I suck at no-gi, so I'm going to train a lot of no-gi to get better at no-gi. And I want to
Exactly.
be better at it because your game, like, I remember when Gordon Ryan went on Joe Rogan's podcast and he said the gi is
Mm-hmm.
dead. I was dating somebody at the time who also did jiu-jitsu, and she got really mad. And she's like, "Oh my god, with all these lapel guards and da, 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 da." And I'm like, "Well, that's why the gi is dead." And she
Mm-hmm.
got really quiet and really kind of mad at me. And I said, "Look," I said, "when you watch like lapel guard flows on Instagram, they're gorgeous. Like, wow, that's really cool. That's slick. Let me see you pull that bullshit off in high level competition. I'll wait. You watch Black Belt Worlds, like I call it Princess Bride Jiu-Jitsu. Like, in the movie Princess Bride, like I see you're using Capafeo. Is that because of the rocky terrain? Like, you know what I'm doing, I know what you're doing, and it's just we're gonna stall the fuck out for the advantage. The only time you ever see an exciting match is when somebody does something where it's either it goes really well for them or it doesn't.
It goes
But
really
that's where the
bad. Yep.
excitement happens. And if not, it's just
Mm-hmm.
two dudes pulling on each other's clothes.
Yeah.
And I can't stand that. That's like as much as I love the gi, it's one of the reasons why I'm actually training more no gi right now too. Is I'm sick and tired of some dude just sitting there and holding on to me in a weird way. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
should be able to break it, but like when you're winning by advantage and you're popping up and beating your chest, I'm like, you basically just stalled out an entire match. That's not fun. Like,
Right.
and I get the purpose of competition is to win, but if that's your only avenue, dude, like, come on, man. Like, especially as we're old, like, look, if there's money on the line, I'll stall out for some money. Like,
Yeah, I will
I'm going
transition all
right.
day.
You damn skippy. But come on, man. Like, work on it. Like, and that's the thing. It's like, and then if you look at all the innovations around no-gi, it's around leg locks. It's around passing. It's around darce chokes. It's around ways to progress and finish the match. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is where if we, you know, I I make memes all the time making fun of guard pulling. And a lot of people get kind of salty at me for it. I'm like, it's my brand. I'm the judo guy. How am I going to sit
Mm-hmm.
there and act like that's the thing? And I mean, this is going to sound a little old school, but I really don't care. Like, I know a jiu-jitsu match is a match. It's not a fight. Like, the closest thing to a fight, like a fight is MMA and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Starting a fight by sitting to your butt just is not a strong move in my book. Again, I know I'm not. I know I'm wrong. Whatever you want to call it, blah blah blah. But let's face it. Look, one of the worst losses I have was in overtime where it was in 2018. I got caught in a footlock while I was going for a footlock, and my ankle is still a little swollen from that. And that was in 2018.
Oh wow.
Now, but the one picture from that match that keeps getting recirculated is of me hitting a drop knee on the guy and his head bouncing off the mat, and he popped right back up. Like, I didn't even get takedown points for it. Like, again, like, more power to him. You know what I'm saying? But like, that one pick is what, it's like big throws, big finishes. That's what people want to see. You want, like, anytime you see highlights of something, like, even like the guys who get mad at me for talking about takedowns, when they see a pretty throw, you can see it in their face. They're like, ooh. And I'm like,
Oh yeah.
again,
Oh yeah.
Like, it's got to be a part of it if you want it to be.
It's
Like,
that intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't see a lot of jiu-jitsu matches where people are excited for like the whole thing. They
Mm-hmm.
waiting for the big throws, they waiting for the crazy submissions and whatnot. But
Well, that's why judo and sambo are Olympic sports. I mean, it's more high amplitude in that regard. And frankly, like, I don't know if I really want jiu-jitsu to be an Olympic sport. I think there's so many effed up federations and ruling bodies and rule sets, and I just and like it's like when people try to add in different belts to the belt progression, I don't like it. And again,
right.
I know there's certain things I can sound like an old man, get off my lawn, and grab my beard, blah blah blah. But I my instructor just got his seventh. Joe came last year to give Ruben his seventh, and Ruben and Joe both originally got their belts. Joe Moyer, by the way, I know you know who I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
yep. But they
I
both
know that guy.
yeah, they both originally got their black belts from one of Carlos's senior's oldest sons, and like, it literally goes like Carlos Senior. I'm not going to do the guy the pleasure of saying his name because it wasn't all, there was a lot of bad things that happened between Joe and him and Ruben and him. And then me, Ruben, me. And there's, when you talk about all these things in jiu-jitsu, with the limited number of belts, the thing that I love is your blue belt was different from my blue belt, which is different from my son's blue belt, which is different. And that's how it's supposed to be. The people get caught up on like, well, this is what a blue belt is, this is what a purple belt is, and I'm like, yes and no, right? A friend of mine, we call her godmother, Betty Broadhurst. She owns Roll Forever, and a couple of years ago, like, even like Rogan reposted this, she got her black belt on the podium at Masters Worlds. Betty's in her
Yeah, I saw that.
60s. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw
And
that.
Betty's a badass. Like, if you're a female in your 60s and you just got your black belt, you're a badass. Like,
You're
period, bottom line,
badass.
end of story. I love that woman, right? That being said, like, I'm sure there's a lot of 20-something year old blue belts that would probably have a good time rolling with her. You know what I mean? Because they're just younger, they're athletic, blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't take away from her black belt.
No, it doesn't.
And
It
I
doesn't.
think that's the issue. It's like, when I remember when I got my blue belt, and I was talking to Ruben one day, and he goes, and I said, because like in judo, you have to belt test, and I hate belt testing. And we were talking about that because Ruben is also a judo black belt, as is Joe Moira. And he goes, look, Bruno, there's 3 ways to get belt. And this is how I believe. Because first of all, there's only 5 belts. There's white, blue, purple, brown, black. You get a white belt when you walk in the door. You get a black belt. Once you get a black belt, everything past black belt comes from a federation. So all you've got is purple, brown, blue, purple, brown, black, right? And he goes, so there's testing. I know you know how to do a Kimura. You can
Yeah.
show me on somebody who's not. I don't care. Let me see how you do in class. Let me see how you do when you compete. That matters.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see your point. He goes, there's like surprise / on the podium. He goes, man, you get your belt on the podium at Worlds? That's a big deal. That's impressive. I agree. You get your belt on the podium at the local Naga? Yeah, some more so, right? And then, or like, like you randomly show up on a Monday and you get a belt. And he goes, it's cool, right? And he goes, but here's why we do what we do, because we're having belt promotions for our team on Sunday. And we
Okay.
always have it. It's not a seminar. It's all about just the people who are getting promoted from all the schools, right?
Oh
Because
wow.
we're around North Carolina, right? So
Okay.
there's like 5 or 6 schools like North Carolina, Virginia. And he goes, look, man, he goes, you earned that belt. You earned it. Like you've put in the time, you've done the work. Your instructor said you have earned the opportunity to put this around your waist. He's like, man, celebrate. Let's have a party. Like, have your friends, have your family, your teammates, man. Let's be proud of what you did.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I remember when I got my black belt, January 2020. So not only did I get my black belt, but Ruben is very old school. And IBJJF, you can be 16 and get a blue belt. Well, it used to be 18. So Ruben was like, man, if you're not in the adult division, you don't get black belt. I mean, a blue belt, pardon me.
Mm-hmm.
So my son, who was like 115 pounds, I started sticking him in adult divisions. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
at 15, I'm like, you want a blue belt, dude? I don't make the
Gotta do
rules,
it.
right?
Right.
And look, it was white belt division, but I'm like, most of the guys are like 135 pounds. They've got like 20 pounds of grown man on a 15-year-old. You know what I
Right.
mean? And he was doing well. And it's the only belt promotion I ever did where my instructor actually really grilled me. Ruben grilled the fuck out of me because it was my son. And I had to
Mm-hmm.
send him footage of a match where my son wasn't supposed to compete. We were at a tournament for Ranger Up. And there was a 140-pound blue belt from a pretty good school in the Raleigh area. And he didn't have a match. And I look over at my son. He was coming off an injury. Wrestling season was starting, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yo, dude, gi's in the car, right? Yeah, I'm like, I throw him the keys. I'm like, go get your gi. He comes running back, has to stop by the Toro BJJ booth to borrow a pair of pants, and I ended up buying him the gi because dumbass had forgotten his pants. And again, was just sitting there working the tables and beats this guy like 11-2. And I'm like, yep,
Nice.
that was the clincher. You're a blue belt now. And
Right.
I got to tie his blue belt on same day I got my black, which was just
That's awesome.
yep,
That's awesome.
a great day.
Oh yeah. Like my daughter, she just started training a few months ago. So,
Okay.
it's been like such a surreal feeling of seeing like your kid like grow up in a sport that you fell in love with.
Yep.
And it wasn't even like I forced her into it. Like, she would, there have been days where she would come to me with, come with me to class. So she'll sit on the side, she'll watch and everything. And then, we picked up, kids class again, because of COVID and everything else. So
Right.
she's been with it ever since. And she's more eager to go to class than I am. So it's like, try not to like jump ahead, but I'm like, oh man, if she sticks with this for XYZ, this is this and this and that. But yeah, man, it's been awesome to see her grow as an individual because it helped her with her self-esteem and she's like a lot more confident now. And
Mm-hmm.
now she's like, she saw me get my brown belt.
Nice.
Was she? Nope, she wasn't there when I got my but she was there when I got my brown belt. My wife just got her 4th stripe on her white belt, so eventually
Nice.
she'll be testing for blue. And now my daughter's just like, when I'm gonna get my next belt? I was like, you gotta don't chase belts. Like we
Nope.
do not chase belts. Like we do not chase belts. We do not chase stripes. You come to class, you work your ass off, and that's all you worry about.
Well, and the thing is too with like little kids, like my son, like I said, my son and I, like if it wasn't for my son, you wouldn't be talking to me right now. Like that's just
Mm-hmm.
facts. I doubt I would have found this on my own. Maybe I would have, but doubtful. Um,
Right.
but like from the time, and I say this all the time, and it's not hyperbole. And from the time he was 5 to the time he was 12, the kid literally had one winning competition, two if you counted DQ. And a lot of times it was because he was smaller or whatever, and like da da da. And I never like the only I this has always been my thing as a coach. Like, and to me as a competitor, like there's times where you're just gonna get your ass whooped. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that person is
Oh
just
yeah.
physically better than you, mentally better than you, whatever it is. But you got to try. Like as long as you don't
Mm-hmm.
quit, it don't matter. And
Right.
like the only time I ever got on him is if he quit in a match. If he lost, he lost. And like the only questions I ever asked him are like, you sure you want to go? Are you sure you want to compete? Are you having fun? These types of things. And he's
Mm-hmm.
actually living in Colombia right now with a friend of mine and like helping run his kids program and do this and that and just trying to figure it out. He's 19 now and he's just trying to be a jiu-jitsu bum for a little while, which I kind of dig. And I'm like, good for you, man. Don't get,
Do it.
don't get anybody pregnant and don't rack up debt and you'll have a good life.
You're right.
But
Keep it on the mats.
hey, man, but I think it's the thing is, so, you know, there's a lot of really beautiful things about our sport. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, one, it's something you can share with friends and family. Like, look, not everybody's going to be into it. Like, my ex wife wasn't into it. I dated a couple of girls who were in the jiu-jitsu community already. I've had some people I've dated, post divorce that were like, yeah, you're never going to catch me on a mat with you. And I'm like, that's cool. Like,
No.
I get it. Like,
Right.
look, it's my thing. Like, I get it. Right. But, you make a lot of friends, you make a lot of family. And then, like, on top of it, like, I, I have met like Joe Moreira. Like Joe love like I love Joe. Joe loves me. Like every time I see Joe, it's a big smile and a big hug. And you know I love being around Joe. I have like how everybody like loves to tell those stories. Like, dude, I saw that band with like three other people in the audience, and two of them were the band's girlfriends. I have Gordon Ryan stories like that. You know what I mean? Like they're like there are these things that like I had this like I was talking to a friend of mine about a year ago and we were talking about just life and I'm like, if you had told me that June day in 2009, hey man, here's the deal. You're going to start doing this thing tomorrow and you're going to lose like 100 pounds. You're going to get two black belts. You're going to travel the world. You're going to sell videos on BJJ Fanatics, which, wasn't a thing back then. You're going to do all this stuff and you're going to change your life in a lot of ways. I'd have laughed in your face. It's like,
Man, what?
yeah, like, come on. Oh,
Come
okay.
on.
Dude,
Come on. Really?
look, I'm making hundreds and hundreds of dollars doing it in competition, but like I am technically a pro athlete at 45 and I'm dying laughing about it. Like, and I'm just like, I mean, I technically am.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I laugh about it because I'm like, I mean, you know what I mean? But it's like, it's funny to say, but it's the truth. And I, you know, I, I sit there and I'm joking. Like I've put out some technique videos. I make some funny memes and I get followers like Rose Namajunas. And I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know how I'm doing it, but I'm doing it.
Like, okay, I'm not gonna question it, right?
I like Thug Rose. She's sweet.
That's my girl right there, man.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, me I think this was around Christmas time. Me and my wife was on our way home, and we were just talking about like how the year's been, and
Yep.
I'm like, man, it's just been wild. Like, started the podcast.
Yep.
Um, I've I've recorded 42 episodes
Yep.
for the
Listen to a
first
couple
for the
today,
first
actually.
season. Right. Thank you. So it's like doing that, getting my brown belt, and then these conversations because I work with my instructor. So
Yep.
we're always talking about jujitsu. We're always talking about the future of the school. We always talking about whatever jujitsu related. And just like you said, like if somebody would have came to you, came to me 6 years ago and ran off that list of jujitsu related stuff, I'm like, yeah, who go do what? Yeah, no,
Look,
nah.
I'll tell you a funny story. So I go to Nogi Pans in 2021,
Uh-huh.
and I'm boosted. I got 8 dudes in my bracket. I'm like, hell yeah! And I make it to the finals, not because I'm good, because my entire half of the bracket no shows. Literally, of me and 3 other guys, those 3 guys did not show up. And I'm like, you dirty bitches. Like, come on, man. And I meet Rowan, I'm going to butcher his last name, Carcianao. Zhukao is his nickname in the finals. And I
Mhm.
don't know if you know who that is. And I didn't know who it was. And then, well, I'll put it this way. I'll give you the low light of the match where he was locking up a body triangle on me and Flat Turtle as we were rolling out of bounds. And they reset us in the middle of the ring with the body triangle with me and Flat Turtle.
Ah.
I didn't know who he was. And I was walking over like afterwards to a friend of mine. 2 of my friends are sitting there. One is named Sean Applegate. He is the head instructor at 10th Planet Atlanta and a really good dude. And another guy named CJ Murdoch, who is, has been in the North Carolina area for a long time, but actually lives out in Mount Vernon now and is training with Pedigo.
Mhm.
And I've known these guys for quite a while. And Sean looks at me because Zhukao trains and has a gym in Atlanta. And he goes, "Man, Vernon, you got Zhukao in the finals?" And CJ put his hand on my shoulder and goes, "That man gave me one of the worst beatings I have ever gotten in my life." Now, I have just gotten the shit kicked out of me, and I want more matches. So they're calling us at the podium. And so I go looking for him. And I see him sitting there like by the bullpen. I'm like, "Hey, bro, they need us at the podium." And he looks at my rash guard, and I had on my Team Hubao rash guard. And he stopped me and he goes, "Man, you a Hubon guy?" And I go, "Yeah." And he hugged me. And I didn't say this out loud because I didn't want to get my ass kicked again. But I was like, "Yo, bro, I ain't comfortable with that after the way you just treated me." And he hugged me and he goes, "Man, when I first come to the U.S., Rubens was such a good friend to me. He took such good care of me. Not only do you have a really good professor for jiu-jitsu, but he's a really good human." And I'm like, "Well, thank you." And then I Googled him and I found his Wikipedia page. So, the movie Warrior with Tom Hardy?
Yeah.
The MMA movie. Okay. So, you know how his
Uh-huh.
brother in the movie is like a last minute replacement in that tournament?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you remember like the big, buff black Brazilian dude he replaces who hurts his knee on the run?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's who I went against. Yeah. 180
Dude, I
cc
just
trial.
watched that movie like 2 weeks ago.
Right. He won 80 cc trials in 2003 in Brazil. I started training in 2009. His second
Jeez,
he fought in
man.
the UFC, by the way, put Mark Munoz to sleep. And his second pro fight was against Anderson Silva. And that's what I'm going against as this kind of hobbyist dude. It's like la 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 la.
Right. But it's that's weird because when I did tap cancer out, looking at the bracket, and it's saying like 10, it was like 10, 12 people in my bracket. And I'm hyped. I'm like, first tournament, we got this many people. I don't care what happens. I'm ready to go. I'm about, at least get three matches in.
Yep.
Get there. Me and only one other guy shows up in our division.
Bruh. Hey, I'm a brand ambassador for Tap Cancer Out. I love those people. They're great.
Yeah, they're
And
awesome. They're great.
and it's like, man, I hate that shit. I got a couple more matches in that day. Like I won my first match in the absolute. I think it was a fight sports guy with a toe hold. And then I go against this dude and he's didn't know this at the time either. He was like the number one guy for my age group in the IBJJF because he just goes to every IBJJF tournament, and he's like 6'5". And I didn't realize he was also a judo guy, and he kept trying these little things, and he couldn't get me, and I couldn't get him, and then I really stupidly went for a no-gi drop knee and kind of gave myself a concussion bouncing my head off the mat.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that bad,
No.
but it was bad, and I was definitely a little dazed, and I was like, shit. Oh well, fun match.
It happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a good time. Like the guy I went against, big guy, 6 something, solid muscle. And I'm like, come on, man. This is gonna be like this is my first experience at a tournament, but gonna find out he used to play professional. I think they say he was either in the NFL or he played something close to the NFL.
Right,
Strong guy. Been competing
right.
since I think he's been competing for like the last 8 years or something like that. So I'm
Oh
like,
shit.
okay, that's fine. That's
Yeah, I've had I remember like I was at this one Naga. It might have been my first. It was my first Naga, and
Mhm.
the no-gi bracket is me, a training partner, and some dude named Adrian Henderson. I'm like, some dude named Adrian, whatever. This giant, like 6'5", boom, 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 comes running over. 4-time state champion wrestler in South Carolina, fought in Bellator,
Don't
and
you
a
love
college
it?
football player. And I was like, damn, he's my boy now. We're actually friends now, but it was like, bruh.
Don't you love it, man? Every single time, man. It's like, cause that was the thing. I'm walking around. It's this at this time the kids were all competing, so
Right.
any of the adults were just street clothes.
Yep.
So I'm looking around to see like, okay, who could maybe this guy, maybe that guy, maybe that guy. The biggest guy in the room
Mm-hmm.
take off his jacket, grabs his belt, and it's purple. I'm like, damn. I'm like, that's
I
who
hate
I
that.
gotta go against.
Dude, like there's like it's always like it's like, all right. Hell, I had a back when I was a blue belt, I was at this tournament and again, I was still an ultra heavy back then.
Hmm.
And I get this dude who is like 6'6", 350 pounds.
Mm.
And I take him down, I pass his guard, he ends up in turtle, and I go for like the gi Peruvian, but I don't get the leg over the head. And he pushes me off and he gets into my guard. He hadn't even passed my guard yet. And he puts all of his weight into my stomach. And I'd been on the road that week for work and I'd gotten food poisoning.
Oh
And I kind of
no.
blacked out and just tapped.
Uh-huh.
And I felt really, really bad about that until I beat him in no gi. I was like, everybody's like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, that was just, I wasn't expecting that. I'm not gonna let that slide. I'm like, I'm gonna keep competing. And I took second in my division. Then I won my no gi division, but I was mad. I was like, damn it.
All right, so we're just gonna so I usually ask this question for all my for everyone who's like either met Joe Moeira or trained under Joe Moeira. It's just a funny Brazilian thing. So it's like, how long did it take for you to speak Joe?
I got it kind of quick because I've been speaking Hubao for years.
Okay.
Like, so my friend John and I helped him out a lot. And we actually had to help him out a lot more because in 2017 he had a massive stroke. And to give you an idea of what type of human Joe is, so he had the stroke in September, and we found out about it. And of course, the messed up part is, like I said, my friend John and I were the one. Like I was a purple belt, John was a brown belt, and we have like black belts in our system, but we were the only ones who had really come up underneath Professor in his gym type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's looking to us, and we're like, all right, we're gonna figure this out because we didn't know what was gonna happen. When the room was in the hospital for like a month or two,
Mm-hmm.
and Joe messages us like right as he found out, and he goes, man, here's when I'm available. If you can pay for my ticket, I would appreciate it. But I'm coming. We're doing a massive seminar, and I don't want a single freaking dime. Everything goes to Professor.
Nice.
Okay. And John and I paid for his plane ticket and everything else. And so I've known Joe, like Joe is a little tougher to understand sometimes, like I will fully admit, but like I I I'm kind of bred for this because not only did I come up under my instructor who like when we'd go to like meetings, because I lived in, John lived a little further away, so I was usually the one driving Ruben. And so like we'd leave, and I get home, and then I start getting text messages. When professor said, like, when we were talking about this, what did professor mean? Because nobody could fully understand it, but nobody wanted to ask the question. And then my wrestling coach in high school was Russian. And so, and like, only like moved to the US like a few years before. So like, I'm good at kind of picking out the accent. So I understand Joe a little bit better. Every now and again, I have to ask questions, but Joe and I really became friends. So I don't know if you know about the instructor course he teaches in California, with Marco Huas and Mansoor.
all, yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't been to that, but he taught a version of that in North Carolina he just ran all 3 parts.
Oh, wow.
And I was partnered with my friend Ben, the one I was telling you about who got me into Sambo. So Ben is definitely better at judo than I am, but I have technically been a judo black belt longer than Ben has.
Okay.
And Joe Joe knows me. He knows, because I've helped set up seminars. I've talked with Joe a lot, but like Joe doesn't know me like that at this point, right? Like it's probably like my 4th time meeting him in person. You know what I mean? And so we're doing like the kind of stand-up portion of it where a lot of it is judo based, because Joe is a judo guy and spent a few years at the Kodokan in Japan and everything else. And Joe is basically explaining how to teach me judo. And Ben and I, because he knows Ben is also under Joe, but through somebody else, through a guy named Kai out in Hawaii. And Ben kind of looks at Joe kind of sheepishly, and I don't know what to say either. And he goes, "Hey, Joe, Vern's actually also a judo black belt, and technically been one longer than I have." And he goes, "Oh, my bad," and just kind of walked off.
Just walked off. Yep.
It's just that, look, one of the few times I've seen God in my life. Thank God I was doing a lot of yoga at the time. I started getting real heavy into yoga in 2021, and actually pushed my shoulder surgery out about a year. And he was teaching a seminar at my instructor's gym, and he was teaching it off what he calls his 4x4 guard. It's kind of like side close guard, like where you're more on your hip, right? And somebody started asking some questions about like, well, how would you pass this? And I don't know if you know about a lot of the legend of Joe's guard passing and how he used to break people's ribs with guard pass. Exactly. So my friend John is his uke for this seminar while he's showing the 4x4. John has a steel rod in his back. So Joe says, "Verno, come here, come here, come here." And Joe does one of those guard passes to me. And I've been doing yoga like 3 times a week for like 2 months at that point. And he looks down at me at one point, and I'm like folded up like a goddamn pretzel, and he's got all of his weight on me. He's like, "You okay down there?" And I'm like, "Doing good, Joe. Appreciate it."
And Joe was going light, by the way. Master Joe was going light, by the way, just for everyone to listen to. But yeah.
Joe, and this is the thing where it's like everybody talks about, like, everybody wants that new hotness. They want that new hotness. Like, oh, so and so just put out this video on this weird fucked up guard and blah blah blah. First of all, a lot of there's some old school guys who are very set in their ways. Okay, Joe is not one of them. He really isn't. Like the seminar he did for my instructor after the stroke in 2018. He's doing his normal things. And if you don't know Joe, he has what he calls his principles, like principles on your back, principles on top. And so he's talking about bottom principles. Here, you're here, you have my line of defense, my 1, my 2. You do this, and then here's heel hoop. Here's twister. And I'm like, did the old guy in the red and white belt with a really thick Brazilian action just say heel hook? Did he just say twister? Like, hold on.
Right, exactly.
And the funniest thing is, like, that was like the day I got my brown belt. And like all of us upper belts, he'd be sitting there and he was just talking about his principles and how he shrimped and how he moved. And I was actually listening to your podcast with Nestor Mendez, and I love Nestor. Nestor's a funny dude.
Hilarious.
And he was talking about how, like you were talking about a private you got with Joe and talking about like the circle snake and this and that. And like you watch that as an upper belt through that eye and you're like, I don't know shit. But all the white belts and blue belts are like, he said heel hook. And we're like, don't worry about that stuff. That's there.
Right.
No. Watch that. Huh? Like he was teaching this other seminar. Ben was my partner. And he was teaching like the cross collar choke, and then like where you pull and you kind of reach over and grab the scruff, right? There you put the thumb in. Ben I remember the first time I threw Ben, and he still beat me in the match, but I was just doing backflips because I was like, "There's no way that should have happened," but I got him anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Ben is not an easy guy to make tap. He's just not. He's got nerve damage from holding off on a leg lock, like from in a tournament, like type of thing. Like Ben's a tough dude.
Right.
And so we're doing the scruff choke.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as like I put my hand like this, he tapped. And I was like, yo, bro, why are you tapping early? And he goes, trust me, I wasn't tapping early. I was like Joe will show you stuff that you think you know, and I'm a black belt. And then like I sit there and I'm like, I don't know shit.
Like I've seen so a couple of Joe stories with me. The first time I met Joe, I was a 2-stripe white belt, and my instructor was getting his black belt.
Nice.
So it was literally like, I've heard about Joe from UFC and everything else, and obviously from my instructor. So when I finally met him, it was just like, dude, like he's standing right here.
Mm-hmm.
So we do the he does his test, he does a seminar, and I think he came back this time with Grandmaster Francisco Mansour.
Yep.
And that was another culture shock. And you see, I talked about this on the episode before. You see Grandmaster Mansour, old guy, hunched over, but man, when he put on that damn gi, he's a totally different person. He's like, it's like night and day. But Master Joe came down and he taught something. I think it was something from 4x4.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working it. And then fast forward, he came back again, and we got new guys, so we're explaining them like, okay, make sure you're on this, just make sure you pay close attention. Like, this is your first time hearing Joe. We've heard Joe about 4, 5, 10 times at this point, so we understand the dialect. And he's going over 4x4. So me and another training partner, we're kind of like, okay, we know what he's about to do. And then he does something different. Same position, just a small little tweak. And we're like, this was there the whole time? Like we're like, our minds are blown, just like the new white belts that just started 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
We're all sitting there looking like, are you serious? But like, yeah, Joe's game just evolves. Like we get videos almost weekly of Joe taking something that he done drilled in us with his principles and rules and snakes and everything else, and he adds something or he finds something new to make it that more simpler and more effective. We're like, all right, so now we gotta learn this before he comes back out, because he's gonna he's gonna include this in some form of way. So it's like, yeah, man, it's hard to keep up with that guy.
Well, but that's the beautiful thing about it. And like he is, Joe has helped me with a ton of things. Professor Rubin, man, like I remember one of my I was at his gym last week, and I was teaching for him, and he's got this old school smash pass, which is always the first thing, like one of the first things he would always show you.
Mm-hmm.
And it became kind of a running joke. But what he would do is he would, you'd be like one of your first days, and you're doing the pass, and of course you don't want to be too heavy on your partner because you don't know, you're not, you think you're supposed to be nice and blah blah blah. And it was always just a really slick little thing he'd do. He'd be like, you do that okay, but you don't put enough pressure. Here, lay down. Let me show you.
Let me show you.
And you'd watch somebody's eyes pop out of their head. It's like, see, more pressure.
More pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're just and
follow your principles.
Oh, by the time like you're a blue belt and you've seen Ruben do this a bunch, you're like,
right, like,
he's doing it again.
Here it comes. Like, here goes. Watch his face.
Oh,
Watch his soul leave his eyes. Oh yeah, that growl, that grunt.
oh, but I mean, there's so many of these guys out there that just, it's funny. It's like, you know, one of the bummers, like one of the gyms I train at is called Carolina Combat. It's down the road from my house, and it's like one I'll pop into, and it's a lot of MMA guys. Brian Battle from the UFC trains there, and they're a Hyoston gym. So that's like
Mm-hmm.
Gokor Chivichian, which I went to a seminar of his last year, which was, again, like, it just, I don't know shit. Like, you get around somebody like that, you're like, okay, I don't know anything. Cool. And Gene LaBelle, and like I always wanted to train with Judo Gene. Like I always wanted to, and Gene passed last year. That's like one thing, like, I'm never gonna get to do that, but I did get
Yeah.
to train with Gokor, and it's like anytime I can be around somebody like that, like
Mm-hmm.
you can just, and look, like I said, I've been to Gordon Ryan seminars, Ethan Kronston, Nikki Ryan. I've trained at Cyborg's gym. I've trained with a lot of really, really good guys, and every time I'm around them, I learn something.
Yeah.
And I like, I I think that's the one thing a lot of people miss is like you have to. I think one of the best ways to approach anything in life, but especially like martial arts, is like what Bruce Lee kind of laid out near the end, which is the Jeet Kune Do concept of just take what is necessary, discard what isn't. But it doesn't mean you don't learn it. It's more just like, okay, this doesn't serve me now. But there's things that like I remember doing as a white belt that I couldn't even remember. I couldn't probably tell you how to do right now because I haven't touched them in so long. And there's things I
Yeah.
remember learning as a white belt where I'm like, I'm never going to be able to do that I do all the time now. So it's how that game plays. And it's a beautiful thing. And that's the thing about like this sport. Like you can learn from anywhere. And there's so
Yeah.
many different people out there. And there's like, the problem is so many people get tunnel vision. And I'm like, why would you have tunnel vision when there's like so many resources available to you? So,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that's something that we kind of like we distill in our students, and we talk about this all the time. As a white belt, you get millions and millions of techniques,
mhm,
and you want to learn them all. You want to learn every single variation that you can possibly think of. Then that list, as you go up in that rank, it just dwindles.
mhm,
It cuts down till you get to like right now, as a brown belt. Yeah, I can show, a lot of techniques just from what I've seen, what I've learned.
mhm.
But if no, I got my little faithful few that I go to and shuffle around every now and then, and it works. So,
Yep.
you know.
Well, here's what I tell everybody. This is the way I believe jiu-jitsu should be.
Hmm.
White to blue and blue to purple is essentially this. Show up, shut up, do what you're told.
Hmm.
Like by the time you're nearing the end of your blue belt, look, everybody's gym has like different drills and different this and different that. Like you should have a good idea of what your gym's culture is. And if your instructor sticks somebody with you that's new, you should be able to take care of them,
Hmm.
teach them what we're going over, and also be able to get something out of it yourself.
Right.
Okay. Purple belt, like I feel like I kind of got kicked out of the nest at purple belt. And I mean, I kind of literally did because I moved to Charlotte and I was away from my instructor.
Hmm.
But purple belt was a lot of just figuring out who I am and what my game is.
Yeah.
Brown belt, like I was only a brown belt for a couple of years, but brown belt was I'm polishing that game. And then walking into black belt, I'm like, I might as well just put a white belt on again because that's how I feel.
That's how I feel. Yeah, because I as I'm not trying to like chase the belt, but we're thinking
Yeah.
like next year potential test for black belt, and one of our brown belts he tests for black belt this year, and just the thought about that is like it's not even like I've had conversations before. That's like, man, you so close to black belt. Like, what are you thinking? Like, what do you think about when you hear that? Fuck, I gotta start doing jujitsu. And that's the only thing I
Well,
get. That's the only thing I see now because all the people that I've talked to from all different ranks, high rank black belts. Talking to Master Joe, um, talk to my instructor, and you just always hear that one thing learning.
Yep.
And it's like, man, you're a black belt. You've been doing this for 10 plus years at this point. You're telling me you're still learning? Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm going to be doing at black belt. I'm going to be learning
Mm-hmm.
jujitsu. You know, it's like,
Well, look, I mean, I'll tell you how I got my black belt.
Mhm.
So it was November of 19, and my instructor had like randomly video chatted me over the weekend, and he was like, belt promotions are coming up. Who you got? And I had my son, and I had this other guy who was up for a blue belt. And I was like, these are my guys. Grilled me about my son, blah blah blah. And he said, okay, Vernon. And he was like, you're a two-stripe. Well, so back that up just a little bit. We had like at the beginning of the year, we had belt promotions, and I'd picked Ruben up from his house, and I'd taken him to the gym, and he was sitting there talking to the guy who, one of the guys who teaches at his gym, who was also a brown belt, and he goes, "Man, Jamie, next year you're gonna go black belt. You just got like your third or fourth stripe. Like you're gonna go black belt next year." And Vernon's like a 2-3 stripe black, brown belt right now, and he probably go next year too. And I go, "Hey, professor, I don't have any stripes on my belt," and he put 2 stripes on my belt, like in the lobby. I was like, "Oh shit!"
there
And
you
so,
go.
flash forward to November, and we'd have a little video chat, and he's like, "Okay," he goes, "We got belt promotions." He's like, you're not going to get your black this year, but next year you're going to get your black." I was like, "Cool. I'm going to go try to win Masters Worlds of brown belt. Like, I'm digging it. I'm fine being a brown belt for another year. Yay me."
Right. No rush.
So yeah, so like a week later, it was like right before Thanksgiving, and I was driving to the gym, and I didn't pick my son up that day because he had wrestling. So that morning, when I'd gone to work, I had posted this picture from like my Facebook memories, but I posted like I had just done it. And I
Mhm.
basically is the back from like 2017 where I had screwed up trimming my beard and I had to shave my face completely because it was just awful. And so I posted it like I had just shaved my beard. And so like everybody's freaking out, like, "Oh my God." So I go live at like 5 o'clock as I'm leaving my office, and I'm like, y'all were rioting in the street. Women were getting mad at me. So I grew it back during my lunch break
Just
like a
grew it
man.
back.
Yeah. So I guess he didn't see my live. I like to be silly.
Right.
And he video chats me and he goes, "Man, Vernon, thought you gonna look different today, Paul." And I was like, "Nah, I was just playing around with people, da da da." He goes, "Okay, cool." And I'm like 6, 7 minutes from my gym, about to go
Mhm.
teach a class. "Vernon, what belt size are you?" I'm thinking he's buying belts for other people and somebody's my size, so he's just asking. I'm not even thinking about it. I'm like, "I'm an A3, Professor Y." "Okay, man." I talk with Sean. I talk with Johnny. January, you go black belt. Do what?
Excuse me?
Like, okay. Like, what are we doing? Seriously? "Yeah, man, you earned it, man. You've been doing really good, man. I'm proud of you, man. You ready?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm really not, but all right, whatever you say, sir." Shit. And the next morning, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I started going to the gym every day at 4 because I'm like, I know I'm not going to have experience on my side anymore. So I damn sure better have strength and conditioning because shit, I'm walking into the
Man.
land of monsters.
Yes. And it was like when I was purple, I was like fourth stripe, and it was another tournament coming up around October. So I was like, well, I'm gonna try to take this tournament serious, and I talked to my instructor, and I was like, could you help me get ready for this tournament? I think it's like a month and some change. He's like, yeah,
Yep.
sure. So, we're going over stuff, and then, I get to class, and he's sitting in his office, and he was like, when is that tournament? I was like, it's October, whatever, whatever, whatever. He's like, oh, all right. He said, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, we got to take care of some stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he just stared at me. And he's like, yeah, we got to take care of some stuff. I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, okay, well, all right. So I was like, so after class, I was talking, driving home, talking to my wife, and I was like, so apparently I'm testing the couple in a month or so, in a month of some change, so I gotta get ready for that. So she's like, really? I was like, yeah.
Yep.
He just kind of told me that I'm testing for Brown in the beginning of October. So yeah, man, it's been a crazy ride. But before we end it, I got a lot of flack for this from people who listen to the other episodes. So I'm trying to get in the habit of asking everybody this.
All right.
What is, so we already talked about Joe because that was like a special question for me. But everyone, like, we want me to ask my guests, like, what is your top 3 dream roles? I mean, you've trained with a lot of people, you wrote a lot of names that people have said. So, but who would be your top 3?
Man, I definitely I'd love to roll with Hodger just to feel that helpless. Like, I want to know what that feels like. I want to know, like, like a guy like Hodger, I'd love, like, roles like, I'll tell you right now, and I remember going on a podcast a year or two ago, actually making this call out. I want Chael Sonnen in a gi.
Uncle Chael?
I want Uncle Chael in a gi. I want Uncle Chael in a gi. I want Uncle Chael in a gi. If I win and he gets mad, gladly go no gi with him. If he beats me in no gi, we can go Sambo rules to, for the tiebreaker. I don't give a rip. And then another guy I'd actually like to roll with, just because we have a very similar game and I'd like to feel it because he feels like the godfather of it, is Eduardo Telles, because, like, I love Turtle Garden. Like, I play it like, some of my teammates will give me some flack, like some of my coaches, where they're like, man, you do that a little too much. And some of it, I will admit, is like when I'm, not in the best of shape and I'm trying to catch my breath and blah, blah, blah. But I really like playing from Turtle, and I think I have a pretty good game from it. And I love watching Telles roll, and I'd love to just feel what his game is like from there. Because it's something where I want to improve. So, there's so many matchups out there where it's like, I know that I'm going to bump into guys. Like, I know the guys who are in, like, my age group who I've looked up to and, like, almost had matches with and things like that. And I'm like, I bring it on. Like, I remember, so I got a buddy of mine in South Carolina who's been ducking me for years, named Brian Edwards. That's another match I want. When he got his black belt, he goes to Masters Worlds. He wins his first match by submission. Yeah, he's on top of the world. Next round, Salo Ibero. Yeah. Now, guys like that like to throw, I have, like, my version of drop knee / fireman's carry is kind of funky. And a lot of people think, like, I had a match back in 21 where, against a guy named Rudy Bears, who's a BJJ black belt, a judo black belt, fought in the UFC and Bellator. And on the video, right before I throw him, you hear some lady in the audience go, "Don't let him pull guard." Okay, I won't.
Okay.
And I remember thinking about, like, Brian going against Salo. And I'm like, if I ever had a match with Salo, I think I can set my throw up, and I think I can catch him with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't give a shit if he breaks my arm afterwards because he felt it was disrespectful. When I die, there's gonna be a little video, like a little, like, LED player on my tombstone.
Oh, your tombstone with that throw?
That has that as a loop, and it's gonna say, "I was up 2-0 on Salo Ibero."
And I will personally make sure that thing stay lit. As long as I can.
Dude, it's funny because, like, I've had this discussion with my kids about when I die. I'm like, because, like, my son's like, man, you got all these gis and medals and shit. And I'm like, look, here's what we're going to do. Here's how my funeral goes. He goes, all right. I'm like, open mat, open bar.
Hey.
If you see somebody you don't like, you are obligated to throw hands.
Fight Club.
Yep. It's open casket. Here's why it's open casket. If there's a submission, you are sick and tired of me hitting on you in life, you can hit on me in death.
Here's your chance.
Yep. I have teabagged Kimura a lot of people. I'm dead. I don't care anymore. I have this one little choke I hit when people turtle. It's kind of like a Peruvian necktie. It's called the Gerby choke, where, like, you use your gi to choke them instead of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And I, like, again, like, everybody tries to hit that or that arm bar from Case Katami on me because that's kind of what I'm known for. And I'm like, I will not let you hit that on me. I will do everything in my power not to let that happen. So I'm dead. You can do it now. It don't matter
Go
anymore.
ahead, be my guest.
And then
Rip it
just
off.
build a little ship, put all my gis, my medals, my belts, all that bullshit on it, kick that bitch out into a river and set it on fire, Vikings funeral style. And I'm done.
Hey,
That's
sounds
what
like
I want.
sounds like a fantastic way to go out, man.
You damn Skippy.
But if you got any other questions for me, man,
No, if you don't mind if I make a couple little plugs.
yeah, I was literally just about to say that, man. You know, if you got anything you want to shout out, your school or whatever you got coming up or
Yep.
whatever you personally doing, man, the floor is all yours.
Well, so I have a video available on BJJ Fanatics. It's called When Judo and Jitsu Converge Part 1. It's all about Keisuke Tami and North South and how to get to them from side control and finish people from there.
Okay.
I also work with bjjjudo.com. They actually have love their rash guards. Their shorts are really slick. They have some really cool stuff. And again, anybody who's going to cross like this, I'm a giant fan of. So that's just me. Because I think one of the things, and I'm kind of writing it out right now and running some scripts in my head because I had shoulder surgery last year, so that kind of put me on the shelf for a little bit. And I really I was debating when I did the thing with Fanatics if I wanted to do ground or standing to start, and I'm kind of glad. And certain levels, I kind of wish I had gone standing, but I have some stuff. I think if you put me into the competitive landscape of judo, I love judo, the martial art. I can't stand the sport. I just hate the rules. The rules drive me nuts. I'm not going to do very well. But my judo for BJJ, I will put up against anybody. And I do really well in Sambo with it too. And I am going to be looking to to create a lot more content in that regard that I'm going to be putting out, hopefully over the next year or so. I'm just trying to figure out how I want to structure it and a few things like that, because I've got a couple of different, I call them positions. I have kind of the way I do my drop knee and my firemen's, and then I have kind of the standard versions of those techniques as well. And then I also have what I call a position I call hip connect, because I've always been the shorter guy. So I'm usually used to getting an underhook and connecting my hip to theirs. And if my left hand is through, I have a ton of throws I use. If my right hand is through, I have a ton of throws I use from there. And they're actually different on both sides. So that type of thing, and just kind of go from there.
Awesome, man. And I can't wait to see what you come up with, man. And we'll definitely link up and definitely plug that as much as we possibly can,
Appreciate
to get,
that.
Get that out there, man. It's that's just what, people in jiu-jitsu do, man. So,
Yep.
But yeah, that is the end of today's episode. I would like to thank Vernon one more time for coming on to the show and blessing us all with his wealth of knowledge and wisdom. I hope you guys learn from us, learn from our experience and tales. Please go and follow all our social media platforms so you can stay up to date on what we're doing and up to date on what the show is doing as well. This has been Talk Your Jits podcast. Keep rolling, keep grinding, and remember, long live jiu-jitsu. Have a great day.